It's okay. Please do the honors.
Okay, good evening, parents, and welcome to our District Parent Advisory Committee meeting today. And my name is Tina Peterson. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services. And tonight I'm going to share with you some information regarding our learning continuity and attendance plan, which has for this year taken the place of our LCAP, which is our LCAP, which is our, oh my, I'm forgetting what our LCAP stands for, Local Control and Accountability Plan. There we go. And so thank you, Allie, for being here tonight and supporting this process and putting this together as our parent manager. And so we are going to get started. This is going to be approximately an hour. It might run a couple minutes over, but I'll try to keep it within the hour. I always like to start on time and end on time. And so tonight, we are going to discuss a little bit about our LCAP and just kind of give you an update for the Local Control and Accountability Plan, give you an update as to what's happened. I want to remind everyone the meeting's being recorded, and then we'll get into a review of our learning continuity and attendance plan, which we're calling our LCP, and this is going to be a give and take. So there's a Q&A section in the on the meeting. And so basically I'm going to provide some information, then I'm going to ask you a question, provide some more information, ask you a question, and give you time in between to answer in the Q&A section. And so that's kind of how we're going to run tonight. And so starting from here, so a little update on our LCAP. Our Local Control and Accountability Plan is normally due June 30th. And so this past year was supposed to be our 3-year annual update. And so we were writing a new plan for the years 2020 through 2023. And so we had spent all year going through and putting that report together. We were actually just about done with it and about to bring it back to all of our parent committees and bring it to the board for approval when the COVID-19 pandemic set in. And so at that point, the state canceled the 3-year renewal of the LCAP. And in its place, they put an operations report that was due June 30th. And so that came out in late April, early May, the operations report. Really what it asked us to do was to explain what we offered during the months of March through June for the end of last year, the fourth quarter, and just explain what we offered for school nutrition, what we offered for support for our students, and what distance learning looked like. And so we wrote up that plan, got that approved, sent that through to the state, and met the deadline of June 30th. And so at that point, we were still planning on having a 1-year LCAP and then putting that off. And so right around end of June, early July, the state came in and said that we no longer are going to do an LCAP this year. Instead, we're going to do what's called a learning continuity and attendance plan. And so they put out some information on it at the beginning of July, but they didn't have a final draft of what we needed to do until August 1st. And the caveat to that is you only have until September 30th to write it. And so we've had most of our staff kind of scrambling to put it together. We've put a draft together, and once we've done that, which we've done at this point, the idea was to come back to our parent groups because we would like stakeholder input, and we have to have stakeholder input as well. But stakeholder input into I'll explain go through and explain the plan tonight. What's missing? What other things parents could use support in, and are there other things that maybe we could do that we're not currently doing to help support our students in being successful this year? And so that's the gist of what the report is in a nutshell. Is kind of that's what it's about, and we'll go through that. And so then with that, part of the LCAP is also a budget overview for parents. And instead of being due June 30th, that is now due December 15th. And so at this point, we don't have all of the information on how to write that yet, and so we're waiting on guidance from the state as far as what the requirements for. And once we have that, we will get started on that. We'll also bring that back to our groups to review before we get it board approved and send it off to the state. And then the LCAP, the 3-year LCAP that was supposed to start this year, is now going to be a 2021 to 2024 LCAP and start next year. And so at the moment, that is due June 30th. Again, we have not received any more information on whether that looks the same as the one we were writing last year, or whether they're changing that based off of the pandemic and what's happened. And so once we get that information, which should come sometime in September or October, we'll be starting work on that. And we do have an LCAP parent committee. We met yesterday with the LCAP parent committee to kind of go over this as well and to get feedback from them as well. And so I want to thank everyone again for being here tonight as we go through this process. So the LCP, or the Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan, has 7 sections in it. And so as you can see here, this is just in general the 7 sections. General information, stakeholder engagement, continuity of learning, which has 3 separate sections, a mental health and social emotional well-being piece, pupil and family engagement and outreach section, school nutrition, and then straight from our LCAP is our increased or improved services for foster youth, English learners, and low-income students. And so that number 7 will be written similar to what we do for our LCAP. So the first 6 of those are what we're going to kind of review tonight and try to get some input from you as parents tonight, and in support of what we've written or helping us to improve it or add new things. And so as I go to the next slide and I start this discussion, I'm going to take each of those sections and we'll go from there. And so the first section, so after this slide, I'm going to ask you a question, and the question I'm going to ask you is based off this slide. So the first section of the LCP is what's called general information. And they basically ask us the question, a description of the impact the COVID-19 pandemic has had on our district and its community. And so, it's very easy for us, being a part of the district, to see what impact it's had on the district. We can also, based off of information gathered from parents, see some of the impact on the community, but really want to get specific parent feedback on the impact it's had on you and your families. And so, so for the district, we closed schools in April. And started our distance learning program. And at that point, went 1-to-1 on Chromebooks. We have in April, May, we developed our schools reopening task force, which began to look at this school year and what we would do. In early June, we surveyed teachers, staff, parents, and students. And if you remember that survey, asked you a lot of questions about your student and how they were doing, how well your thoughts on how distance learning went from March to June, and some questions about this year and what you'd like to see this year. And then somewhere in June and July, as we went back and forth with the state, the reopening task force determined to open in both a full-time or full-year distance learning option for students, as well as a facilitated online learning for secondary, and the hybrid once we go back to school, either the full-time or a hybrid, which is a 50-50 model. And so some of those are still yet to be determined as we get closer to moving back to actual in-class and in-person teaching. We added grab and go meal services, provided again the Chromebooks and hotspots were needed. And then we centralized communication by getting everyone basically our main platform as Q Communicate and our WebEx. WebEx and Google Meets as our 2 meeting informations for parents. And so those are the big changes that we've experienced as a district. And so our first question, and again, I'm going to give you about a minute to a minute and a half for these questions to write your response in the chat. There's 3 ways you can answer these questions. The first is to write your response in the Q&A. Sorry, not the chat. Please use the Q&A. in the Q&A. The second is at the end when I'm done and we end the meeting, there will be a survey just to give you an idea. 15 questions throughout this presentation. And so at the end of the presentation, when you exit the meeting, that survey will pop up with those 15 questions. You can write them at that time, or you can write down the question right now while I give you that time, and you can send us an email, and I'll give you the email address at the end of the meeting. So for right now, I'm going to give about a minute to a minute and 15 seconds. It is going to be silent. I'll give you a 10 seconds to go warning that we're going to move on. And the first question is, what impact has the COVID-19 pandemic had on the district and our community? And for you, what impact did it have on you and your family? So go ahead and give you about a minute to answer that in the Q&A. Okay, about 10 more seconds. And we're going to move on to the next slide. The second question, or the second section of information, was on stakeholder engagement. And so there were a couple questions we had to answer within this. And one of those questions was a description of the efforts made to solicit stakeholder engagement. One is a summary that's provided by our stakeholders, as well as then what parts of our LCP were influenced by specific stakeholder input. And so this is a very important question tonight, because some of what we write or add to our plan is going to be that section on what input from parents or stakeholders did we use to influence our plan. And so that's what we're looking for tonight, is some ideas and some information from parents. And so the efforts we've made so far to solicit stakeholder engagement, and this goes back to spring semester as well, and the things that we've done since this started to get information from parents. And so first thing is just we've used our technology, phone calls, Q-Communique website, social media, and email to provide information and to receive information from our stakeholders. The second is almost everything in our offices now goes out with a Spanish translation. We have a language line that's available for other languages besides English and Spanish if we don't have translators available. And then we've provided a sign language interpreter when requested at our meetings. And so those are items that we have included based off of input from stakeholders. We've had meetings. The majority of our meetings are held in Spanish and English at the same time, or we'll have an earlier Spanish meeting and a later English meeting. And so we've been able to do that. Our stakeholder group meetings have still been intact. Our CAP meetings, we met with students in the spring. Our parent steering and writing committees have continued to do their work. And then today we're meeting with our district parent advisory. Yesterday we met with our DLAC group, and then on Thursday we're meeting with our African American parent advisory group to get their input as well. We sent out a survey at the end of last year to parents, teachers, staff, and students to get their input. And we've had multiple parent support meetings through language support that our parent manager, Alejandra, who's here tonight, has led a lot of those. And then we've had several school site parent meetings that each school site has put together. We've also begun a call center to support information, two-way communication between the district and parents. And then the district is all their engagement on our district DSDP, which is a district design partnership to support us or look at the systems within our district and how to improve those. And so our second question, and again, I'll give you a minute and 15 seconds to write. Have you participated in any of those stakeholder meetings mentioned? Have you gone to the parent workshops? Have you gone to those meetings? Have you gone to site meetings? And then what other means of participation would be beneficial? So are these meetings enough to provide you information? Do you need more? What would that look like? Please give us some feedback on that. And again, I'll give you about a minute to do that, and I'll give you a 10-second warning when we're ready to move on. About 10 more seconds. And let's move on to the next area. So the next areas are in-person instructional offerings, and that consists of two areas. What happens when we return to school? And then how do we support the continuity of learning when we go from in-person to hybrid? Now, this is probably something that we have probably the least amount of information on because it's currently being worked on and will continue to be worked on over the next month or so. And so when we return, it's more likely that we'll return in our hybrid 50-50 model. And the example that we are focused on supporting is a two cohort model, with cohort A would attend school Monday and Tuesday, cohort B would attend school Thursday, Friday, and then the remaining time would be spent in distance learning. This provides, although not, ideally we'd like to be back 100%, but until we can get to that point, this provides a safer alternative, as well as providing some of that social emotional support that we've been hearing from our parents and our students that is needed. Students being able to interact with students being able to interact with their teachers in person, as well as our staff being able to interact in person. And so as soon as we can safely do that, that is one of our goals to get to that. And so the report explains a little bit about that. And then the support for continuity of learning between in-person and hybrid. So we talk about the options that we give parents before we start the year. So we did give the option of staying full-time in distance learning for the year. At the secondary, we gave the option for the facilitated online learning, and then we gave the option for the hybrid that for those that will return to school when it's safe to do so. And then one of the ways we check for learning or the continuity of learning is by providing diagnostic assessments, and those are ongoing right now in ELA, math, and English language development. And for elementary, they're using the iReady program and DIBELS to provide some of that information. And for secondary, using a reading inventory and ALEX, which is a math program. And what this does is provides an initial assessment so teachers can understand where their students are at, if there's any learning loss from last year and the last quarter of last year, and it will give them a starting place as students move forward this year to evaluate the learning that's occurring. And then our English learners did the same. Their diagnostics include DIBELS, iReady, and IBEL. And then special ed is using the similar diagnostics, IXL as one of those as well. And most of that information is supported and developed in students' IEPs. So the question for the third question is basically this: what are your biggest concerns with your students in distance learning? And what are your biggest concerns with your students if or when we return to a hybrid 50-50 model? Feel free to answer one or both. Again, we'll give you about a minute to do so, a minute and 15, and then warning. Give you about 10 more seconds. And we'll move on to the next section. And so the next few questions are going to be specific to our distance learning program. And as far as getting input from you on that. And so continuity of learning, similar to the last question. One of the questions, how are we going to from last year to this year and within the transition to keep that keep learning going, or the continuity of learning going? And so we had students have access to multiple tools over the summer, which is why we made sure that students kept their Chromebooks so they could use that if they wanted to. During the summer, we also had teacher planning committees, and so over 400 teachers came in for a week or two during the summer and took a look at the pacing guides and their curriculum, and basically adjusted them and moved them around so that knowing that we were going to be in distance learning and knowing that eventually we might be going back to a 50-50, providing the basically gearing them towards that idea. And so what they were able to do was adjust the curriculum, making sure they're still meeting the standards, but making sure that that information is being covered. And so then when the rest of the teachers came back, they shared those plans with the rest of the teachers, and that's how they're planning their committee for their curriculum for the year. And then access to curriculum, our students were provided Chromebooks and textbooks at the beginning of the year, as well as hotspots. And then we have multiple tools, technology tools available to help students and teachers succeed. Probably the biggest two is Google Classroom and Seesaw. Google Classroom is for most of our 3rd to 12th grade classes. Seesaw is a K2, or for those that aren't using Google Classroom. We're now providing Screencastify, which is a support for teachers to in their work with students. Flipgrid is a good communication tool to provide teachers and students a way of videoing answers and videoing questions and showing material and showing learning through that. And then we talked about using WebEx and Google Meet for most of our meetings that occur throughout the year. And so our input for number 4 is, does your student have access to curriculum and instructional resources to ensure learning occurs? If not, what else is needed? So at this point, your student should either have access to curriculum electronically, they should have textbooks. Do they have what they need? That's what this question is asking. Do they have what they need? If not, what else is needed? And so I'll give you about a minute to put that in the chat box. Or the Q&A. About 10 seconds. And moving on to the next slide, our distance learning program, access to devices and connectivity. And so we've talked a little bit about this already. All students have been provided access to a Chromebook. There should not be any reason that a student does not have a Chromebook at this time. And so if you have a student that does not have that, please contact the school sites immediately. Students have access to hotspots where internet is an issue. They are still being handed out as needed. We did have 2,800 hotspots. The first number one plan was for those students that had no internet to make sure they had those. And we went to students who had to families that have multiple students or families that were having issues with connectivity. And so we've handed out 2,800. There's another 2,500 that the district just received. And so IT is working with those hotspots right now to set those up so they can go out in the next week or so. And so if you still need access to that, please make sure that you're on a list at your school. Contact your principal or your admin at the school or your teacher and make sure they add you to the list so that when they're available in the next week or so, that will be sent out, and that will also go out publicly across our communication tools. Our teachers and staff were provided access to laptops and Chromebooks. We have a Chromebook and hotspot exchange at school sites. WebEx Voice has been provided to staff and teachers so that phone calls can be made without staff or teachers providing personal information. Keeps privacy issues in balance there. And then communication, communication, as I said, is our main communication information portal. And then parent portal is used to provide information to parents. If you have not yet signed up for parent portal, please make sure you contact your site. In order to do that, this will provide you information about how your students doing on your school site, and then make sure that we have your email addresses and things on file so that we can make sure that we contact you when needed and that you're getting information about these meetings. And then we also have parking lot Wi-Fi at our 4 middle schools. So, and we are working on Retchie Canyon Elementary School, adding parking lot Wi-Fi there because of some issues in the canyon, as well as looking at the possibility of other items like having a Wi-Fi bus somewhere where we're having connectivity issues. And so please make sure that if in your area you live in a canyon or you live somewhere that has those issues, that you're letting us know so that as we come up with ideas or creative solutions, or if you have something, put it in the Q&A, and as we come up with that, we're able to start that. And so the next question basically asks the same: does your student have access to a Chromebook in our hotspot? And then are there additional needs that can support technology and connectivity with your student? They give you about 45 seconds for this one. I think this one should go a little faster. About 10 more seconds. Okay, next slide is the pupil participation and progress in distance learning. And so this is more a requirement from the state for our district and for our teachers, and basically states that we've explained how teachers will keep an engagement record. This provides information to meet attendance and daily instruction is to for grades 4 through 12, 240 instructional minutes, which is 4 hours is required. K through, I'm losing my, I think K through TK and K, it's 180 minutes, and then 1 through 3 is 230 minutes. And so this provides our teachers, they have to report back not only synchronous, which is live instruction, how much time was spent in live instruction, as well as asynchronous, which is how much the time value of an assignment was that they provided. So that's where they combine those instructional minutes. So you're probably finding teachers are live with your students at certain points during the day, and then students are working on their own at certain points during the day. And all total, that should at minimum reach that 3 to 4 hour mark there. And so finally, the question for this one is your child participating in class daily? And then what are the barriers to participation? So if they're not participating, what are the barriers? And even if they are participating, what are some of the barriers? So I'll give you about a minute for that question. 10 seconds. And moving on to professional development. And this is how we are supporting as a district, supporting our teachers as they move through distance learning. And so we have a platform called Alludo, which allows us to put record any of our sessions for professional development, bring in sessions for professional development, videos and things like this. And it gives us a platform that teachers can go to and pull out information for professional development using how to use Google Classroom, how to use different instructional strategies using technology and so forth. And so we have CPSs, curriculum program specialists, that are specific to technology that assist our teachers with various instructional technologies and how to use those, as well as people on site supporting them in an IT department. Curriculum, majority of our curriculum now has both online and book or paper in order to support both ways of learning. We have information for teachers on a multitude of English learner strategies that can be implemented in the classroom to support differentiated instructions, not only with English learners, but also with our special ed and our foster and homeless youth, and all students in general. They're just good teaching strategies. We are working on beginning a process of providing professional development on culturally relevant teaching and cultural competence with support for admin teachers and students this year as well. And we'll be rolling that out shortly. There will be a multitude of professional development for social emotional learning as we're working with our teachers to help support our students that are at home and our families, as well as support for our counselors to increase their skills to support our students and our families. And then, as we talked about earlier, support for special ed students and teachers in the same way as our English learners, and then foster and homeless youth. And then we're also providing professional development, our version of professional development for parents, with support and workshops on how to support your child and how to use some of the instructional tools or the tools that are available to you to access as well. for parents is, we know in a lot of ways you've taken on a lot more responsibility. So what support do you need that the district can provide to help you support your students in distance learning? I'll give you a little bit, about a minute and 15 for this question. And again, please enter it into the Q&A. Take about 10 more seconds for that. All right, moving on to the next one. This one's rather quick. New roles and responsibilities. And so this is very specific to our district staff and school site staff, and what roles and responsibilities have been taken on since we began distance learning in all of our divisions. And so here we put information from the superintendent, the communications department, our educational and student services, and our human resources and business services department, and basically just goes through. A lot of us are working remotely, or a combination of at the office and remotely, and then different things that we've taken on. I like to say, I don't think I've ever, I think if you added up all the meetings I've been in my entire life online, I've probably quadrupled that in the last 3 months, as I'm sure many of you have as well. And so we just go kind of into detail on how our roles have changed a little bit and our responsibilities have changed in this new reality that we're in right now. And so my question to you on this one, and this gives you a little bit of little place to sound off as well, is what new roles and responsibilities do you feel that parents and students have taken on as a result of distance learning? And so this kind of goes with the first question about the impact of the pandemic on your family, and then so what roles or responsibilities have changed with you as a result of distance learning that you've taken on? Again, I'll give you about a minute for this one as well. Give you about 10 more seconds. And then with distance learning, next slide talks about support for students with unique needs. These are specific, this was a specific state question, as many of you know. Part of our funding is derived from our special populations and our unduplicated student count, which also includes the English learners, our special ed students, homeless and foster youth, and our low socioeconomic. we supporting these students with unique needs? And I'll be the first to say every student has unique needs. So, but this report specifically talks about these three areas, and so we've listed some of the ways that we're providing extra support using the funding that's provided by the state in order to target support for these individuals and for these students. And so for English learners, we've integrated and designated supports that are provided during the school day. Use of our LPAC, which is the state assessment, to redesignate students. We have specific counselors, TOAs, site leads, and curriculum program specialists that are specific to our English learners. And then our elevation program supports targeted intervention and also provides us a way of getting real-time data on how our students are doing, how our English learner students are doing in the classroom. And so with special ed, you really don't change as much other than they move to a remote situation. And we're providing the same opportunities and the same support that we always do. In addition, students have individualized distance learning plans, and these are being created based off student IEPs. We still provide language, speech, and hearing services, counseling services, adaptive physical education, and occupational therapy are still ongoing. And then we also have curriculum program specialists specific to special education that support our teachers and provide PD for our teachers as well to support their continued improvement. And then our homeless and foster youth, we have targeted outreach that provides support for nutrition, connectivity, clothes, school supplies, and ways to engage community resources that are available to support our students. And so those are areas that, again, for students with unique needs, but as I said, all students have unique needs. And so what additional supports, leads to this question, what additional supports can the district provide for your child's unique needs? And so give you about a minute to start that and answer that in the Q&A, and then we'll come back. About 10 more seconds. And moving on now, discussing the next section of the LCP Learning Continuity Plan deals with pupil learning loss. And so this is pupil learning loss is basically the kind of a gap that it was our gap created last year, or learning that didn't occur that should have occurred, as we go through the year, is there learning loss that is occurring. And so that's one of the reasons for providing the initial diagnostics in ELA, math, and ELD. We also have our teachers doing vertical articulation and horizontal articulation. And what that means is that they have there's time built into their schedules for collaboration, and they collaborate across the grade levels so that they can support each other. And then also within grade levels, usually a grade level above and a grade level below, and make sure that the items that need to be addressed at each level are occurring. And so they address pupil learning loss during small group interventions, one-on-one support and monitoring, and then through the use of our different programs, which show progress as they go through. We are currently working on a comprehensive tutoring or small group engagement after hours or during non-live instruction. As you can imagine, since everything Our IT department is pretty bombarded with just the start of school year and getting things going and with the requirements the state is providing with our engagement record and our attendance. And so we're just now getting those things finished up and can now look to set up our tutoring programs and how we're going to do that. And so stay tuned for that as far in the next couple weeks. That a lot more information about that will be going out. And then social emotional support and counseling is being provided at the school sites. We have a mental health department that we'll get into in the next slide or next couple slides, and we'll go from there. And then can we look at extracurricular activities and what are we doing now that since we can't have in-person live, athletics or things like that, what else can we do to support some kind of extracurricular activities? And that leads to our next question. And I'm going to give you probably a minute and a half for this one, a little bit longer. What additional supports are needed to help your student be successful? And then would your student participate in online clubs and activities after school hours or on the weekends? What ideas do you have for activities that would be of interest to your students? And so please give us as much feedback as you can to provide ideas that we can possibly take to our sites and see what we can come up with. I'll give about a minute and a half for this question. About 10 more seconds. Okay, on to the next slide. I hope those of you are getting that minute of quiet too and find some kind of peace. And there's a little bit of peace in that minute of quiet that doesn't seem to be there throughout the day. And so as you're writing your answers, I hope you're getting a little bit of peace and quiet for that minute and a minute and a half to do so. All right, the next section is our mental health and social emotional well-being. And so one of the things that you may or may not know is that over the last few years, our student services division has added basically a mental health department. And so we have a mental health coordinator who works with local university interns and provides, so each school has provided mental health interns. And so with that, we are offering through our social emotional well-being, basically some tiered supports for students. And so tier 1 is universal prevention, and that's just for very simple or for day-to-day things. So access to community resources for mental health prevention, self-help resources, how can you help yourself, coping and resiliency due to crisis and trauma. And a lot of this can be coordinated with teachers, counselors, and our mental health interns, and this is at the lowest level. As concerns arise, then we go to tier 2, which is our mental health program staff and counselors. And our counselors are going to use a social emotional curriculum and online empowerment programs to support our students as we work throughout the year and provide that within the classrooms too. And this year we're also piloting some organized supports at school sites with wellness rooms. Right now they're at GTHS and Colton. And as again, we're piloting these. And so the hope is at some point that we're able to do them Tier 3 supports for students would include our mental health staff. And here we're trying to identify the at-risk, highest at-risk students and refer to programs and community agencies and or work with our current staff in Colton to provide individual group counseling and family supports. And so we want to make sure that parents, that you understand that's available. A lot of the information, a lot of the feedback we've been getting throughout these 2 days that we've had meetings is that there is a need for some social emotional support for some of our students and for some of our families. And we really want to make sure that you know how to reach out to gain that, to get that support if necessary. And so this question is really, are you aware of how to access support for your student if they're in need of mental health or social emotional learning support? And then what additional supports would you like to see offered in this area? And so I'll give you about a minute to answer that question. About 10 seconds. On to the next question. We only have 2 more slides as far as information and then about 3 or 4 more questions. So for pupil engagement and outreach, again, this is one of the things that's required by the state for each district is to provide re-engagement strategies to support our students with regard to learning loss if they've been absent for an extended period of time. And so what we've asked our sites to do is each site to come up with our a three-tiered program at their school site and how they will address students missing school for whatever reason. And so tier 1 would be prevention and intermediate and immediate intervention. And those are, the phone calls home, your child wasn't here, wasn't in school today or didn't participate. After a few days of not seeing a student, those tier 1 prevention and immediate intervention should begin. Tier 2 is intermediate, and that would be more counseling support, going a little bit more extensive into that, possible SART contracts, things like that. And then tier 3 would be the intensive support. We're really trying to find out what the issue is and work on addressing the concerns or issues as to why students aren't participating or are struggling with participating in school. And so question for this, how can we support you as a parent? Because we know a lot of this is falling on you as a parent to make sure your kids are going to school and staying engaged and doing what they need to do. So how can we support you as parents in keeping students attending and engaged in school? I'll give you a minute for that one. About 10 more seconds. And this is the final slide. And so right after this slide, there's going to be 3 quick questions, and then we'll wrap up. And so, We have daily grab and goes at 9 locations from 11 to 1. All of our schools are now what's considered CEP, or community eligibility provision, which means students no longer have to pay for meals, and so all the meals are free for our students when they come in. They usually get a breakfast and a lunch to pick up and take home. And so right now we're looking at, you should have received, I know we had over 600 responses to a nutrition survey that went out about a week or so ago. And right now we're looking at different times and possibly extending the time to support parents that are working to pick up meals, and multiple ways of how we can get meals out to students. And so please stay tuned for some of those provisions. And the question, again, there's going to be 3 questions in a row. The first one is, please provide feedback on our nutrition program if you are participating. So if you are unable to participate, is there a way the district can be of support? I'll give you about a minute for that. About 10 seconds. And then actually hot off the presses, tomorrow we actually are starting, I just got information from someone that tomorrow we are starting our extended meal hours at the 9 locations. It'll be from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. So that provides an extended period of time for parents or students to go and pick up their food for the day. So the next question, we're going straight into, we have 2 more questions available, or 2 more questions to ask. If money was no option and there was funding available, what would you like to see supported by the district that is currently not being done? And so please take a minute to answer that question. Ten seconds. And then our final question, please provide any additional feedback and how you feel the first 2 weeks of school have been for your student. How are things going with the last 2 weeks? And then I will come back to wrap it up. Take a minute for that. About 10 seconds. So I'd really like to thank you tonight for participating. I know this is a really weird way of doing meetings that we have now, and takes some getting used to. And again, I appreciate if you put information in the Q&A. Thank you for that. When you end up leaving the meeting, there'll be the same questions in a survey format. You do not have to answer them again if you put them in the Q&A. If you'd like to answer anything or add more, you can do that through that, or you can even email us on the screen, lcap_info@cjusd.net for additional feedback and or questions. We had about 100 pages of comments yesterday from parents, which were exceptional. And so it gives us some great ideas. And so today we spent time going through and kind of categorizing and looking at what people said, and we will continue to do that with your comments. I would like to just be made aware that one of our board members, Bertha Argine, is here with us tonight, and so I'd like to welcome her to our meeting tonight, and thank you for participating. But I want to thank everybody for your time tonight and your input. It is extremely valuable to us in putting this plan together. Everyone talks about this being unprecedented times, and really never has it been more important. We keep saying we're all in this together, and never has it been more important than right now. And we want to do all we can to support you and your family, as well as we hope you'll do all you can to support us and our teachers. And moving forward, again, you have an email address right there that you can send questions to, and contact numbers. Our website provides up-to-date information, so please make sure you're keeping an eye on that. There isn't one more scheduled parent meeting this week is our African American Parent Advisory. I'm going to go through the exact same thing I did tonight here. So if you're here tonight, you don't necessarily need to be at the one on Thursday unless you want to provide the same information. And so really want to thank you, Ali, for Alejandra, for your support tonight and for being here, and Mr. Diaz for your support being here tonight. And thank you all for attending. And we'll leave the chat open or the Q&A open for a few more minutes if you'd like to post anything.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. And with that, I'm going to suspend the recording. I want to remind parents that we will be posting the recording of the meeting. If they know parents who would like to listen to the information you provided tonight, they can go to our main webpage, and on the parent meetings, they can look at the recordings. Thank you.